How are you guys doing tonight? I'm Paul Peschel. I'm doing a talk on advanced quarantine techniques. And we have a lot of slides to get through today. So I'm going to go kind of fast. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask at the end. I'm from Aquamoon. I'm the regional lead in Wisconsin. We're a nationwide maintenance company, and I've been involved in public aquaria, zoo and aquarium subcontracting companies. I do a lot of work for private clients as well, consulting and whatnot. So today, we're going to get through real quick on these first couple steps. Then I'll have a live demonstration. Well, not so live. The fish is dead, but we'll be taking some biopsies on a microscope, and I'll show you exactly what I'm seeing there, as well as going through some slides of videos and of past cases. So with that, why do we quarantine? Well, if we don't quarantine, isopods run away with your Doritos, and that's no good. So what it does is it reduces mass loss, the chance for it at least. So when you're introducing a new fish to your aquarium, that fish has the potential to bring in something that kills everything. So quarantine allows you to kind of mitigate that risk. Thereby protecting your investment with your aquascape, your corals, your live plants. You know, ripping a whole tank down to get a fish out, or a couple fish out, or the whole tank out can be a very problematic situation. And fish handle stress events a lot better because they don't have chronic stress from parasites continually feeding on their host. So both acute and chronic stress can cause mass mortality of fish, and mitigating that chronic stress really helps with power outages from hurricanes, or forgetting to feed for a few days, that sort of thing. And it's always more economical than reef-safe treatments, almost always. There's, ruby reef and H2O2. A lot of those treatments cost a lot of money. This can mitigate that cost. I've heard a lot of quarantine myths out there online. It destroys the immune system. It really doesn't, because when they come in from a wholesaler or are in a retail tank, they're getting exposed to a ton of new diseases, stuff they've never were exposed to before from different regions of the world. And helping that fish out can actually make them somewhat immune to those diseases through quarantine. And it shortens the fish lifespan. I've heard that quite a bit. There currently is no scientific paper on a fish's lifespan being shortened by quarantine. So while I can understand, you're exposing your fish to carcinogens and stuff like that, that can really wreak havoc with, a fish's organs and that sort of thing. I would argue that mass casualty events shorten lifespan a lot more than anything a quarantine does. I've heard that it doesn't get rid of the common parasites like cryptocarrion or ick or anything like that. that's usually not because of the quarantine itself, but because of a missed, a missed dosage or misuse of a drug, or what they're seeing is not actually what they're actually seeing, which makes the microscope a whole lot more confirmation there for that. And people think it's stressful on the fish, and yes, it can be stressful, but there are ways to mitigate that stress, and that's what I'll go in through here. This is my whole philosophy on quarantine, and it's too expensive. A 10-gallon with a basic filter heater is not that expensive. Complete setups. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Used tanks, Rubbermaid containers, all can be used for quarantine. So today's focus is 5 steps. Assess, condition, treatment, confirm, and introduce. These are my 5 steps to a quarantine process. The first one is assess. And at the store before purchase, or when you receive an order from a wholesaler or a transshipper, you're always assessing the fish before you purchase it or after you have it in your system as a retailer. So you kind of have to make sure that it's eating, or assess if it's eating, acting normal. Is it swimming around? Is it supposed to be swimming around? Is it supposed to be hiding? Is it supposed to be, I don't know, just a bunch of different behaviors, natural behaviors that fish expresses, it should be expressing. Is it in good body condition? Does the body have, basically I do a basic assessment, which we'll get into a little bit later. And is it from a reliable source? Obviously there's like Indonesia, Philippines for saltwater can be kind of iffy with cyanide poisoning and all that. Buoyancy issues from decompression, if it's a deeper water fish. Same thing with like Asian imports on the freshwater side. That can be iffy. And obviously if it's already damaged or has visible parasites, that needs to be assessed and accounted for at that time. And you also have to ask the questions provided here, like, can you provide for its spatial needs? Can you, does it fit with your plan of where the fish goes in order of adding? Can you fulfill its dietary requirements, like a mandarin or scooter blenny? They need a lot of natural foods. That can be a real hurdle to get over in quarantine. And is your quarantine physically ready for fish? Is it cycled? Is it, up to temp? That sort of thing. So right now we'll do some assessment, real live assessment in practice with this 2D photo. But really, when you look at the fish, you're checking, of course, if it's eating, if it's acting normal. This fish is a tang, so it should be swimming around. I kind of hesitate to see, tangs can do that whole whirling on the glass, back and forth. That's a stress response. It doesn't like something, it's getting picked on, or it sees its reflection. That can damage its mouth. Definitely want to be aware of that. Is this fish in good condition? So who thinks this fish is a 10 out of 10 perfect specimen, healthy body weight, 10 out of 10. That would be like the best fish ever. Nobody. That's good. 9? 9? 8? 7? 6? Okay. 5? 4? 3, 2, 1? Okay. So this is about a 6, 7. You can kind of see the body itself is nice and full, but there are some very concerning cheek issues. That's where a lot of these fish have reserves, is the cheek area where it's really concave. You can see the shadow there. That's a really key indicator on these fish, whether or not they're fully, fat. Beautiful finnage and no noticeable damage. Is it from a reliable source? Well, these fish come from very sketchy areas in the Indo-Pacific. So you can't be too sure. You might want to leave it at the store for 2 weeks. Watch it. Make sure it's improving body condition versus getting worse. And then this fish gets big. It's active, so we're going to need a big display tank for it. And is it part of the plan? So this fish is very aggressive. It'll attack your arm hair and rip it out. Personal experience. So you definitely want to make sure that the fish that you are adding after it, especially, are just as aggressive. And obviously, this fish eats seaweed, a lot of seaweed, vegetative matter. We want to make sure that we can provide that in quarantine while it's getting its regimen. And is your quarantine ready? For the freshwater folks, this little ram here in this hypothetical situation doesn't appear to be eating, is not in the perfect body condition. You can kind of see behind the fin, the pectoral fin, a slight concave in the body. This fish was breathing heavy and staying in one spot, not typical of the species. The finnage was perfect, but there is some issues with on the pectoral fin. There's some white spotting. I don't know if you can see it there, but there are some white spots. Those could be broken rays of the fins. Sometimes those get damaged in transport and whatnot. But we definitely want to investigate that when we get to the microscope part. And then, is it from a reliable source? These guys are frequently imported from the Asian markets. It could be dodgy, right? So we got to preferably keep it at the store for a little bit. Small fish, so spatial needs shouldn't be an issue, and not very aggressive fish. So that should be an easy add to any passive tank. Small carnivore, so really easy feeder. And is your quarantine ready? So now we're on to step 2. We purchased the fish. This is the most overlooked step in the quarantine process for most people, and it's conditioning. Conditioning is to ensure that the rigors of medication doesn't kill the fish. It's to prepare. Best case example, are you going to fight off a cold when you're stressed and it's cold outside and you're miserable? Probably not. So we want to make sure that you haven't eaten for 3 days, right? You want to eat and get fat and be happy. And this period, it begins when fish are added to QT and extends all the way to the end of treatment. You're always trying to get fish to eat and eat multiple times while in quarantine, multiple times per day. So the observation period obviously is a fattening up period. So conditioning and practice, we got no meds at first. We're feeding many times per day and making sure they're eating. We're making sure they're eating a quality food versus, like a brine shrimp. Brine shrimp would be something that, initially is good. You just want calories into that fish, right? Calories. And then switching them over to like a pellet or a mysis or something like that is very important transition before they're actually, going through the rigors of medication. And we're watching for damage and making sure they're in good condition, acting normal, swimming around, no stress barring, that sort of thing, hiding in the corner, hating life. Sometimes they do when you add medication, and that can be a problem long term, but sometimes it's a temporary thing too. And then we begin medication, and conditioning continues throughout. So what we got now is treatment, but there is a little subcategory, and this is kind of important too. We're watching for sensitivities in the species that we're treating. So say you're doing a wrasse, quarantining a wrasse. That wrasse is probably sensitive to copper. So we're watching for medication sensitivities in a specific species, and probably doesn't like chloroquine diphosphate a whole lot. So that's another thing that you're watching for. Specific common pathogens with that particular species is also a concern. So like a clownfish with Bruchinella, Bruchinella is a common clownfish disease. Urinema is a common butterfly fish disease. Ick with the clown loaches for freshwater, that sort of thing. You're definitely tailoring your quarantine to those specific pathogens that a fish is susceptible to. As an aquarist, you might have pharmacological limitations. Sometimes you can't get a certain medication very easily, so you definitely want to keep an eye out for issues that might arise from that. And then you'll need your quarantine supplies: aeration, neutralizers, carbon, testing equipment, dipping bins that you can clean out real easy, biosecurity supplies like a bleach and thiobin, sodium bicarbonate for a heavy load of quarantine fish can help stabilize that pH and alkalinity during treatment. And then you want to make sure that your schedule fits with the quarantine process, right? So, you can't quarantine a fish when we are going to be gone for a week. It doesn't really work that way. So definitely want to consider that before starting the medication treatment. Generally, we're looking for 30 days during the quarantine process. We're going to go over some supportive drugs that I use for fresh and saltwater. Dips. We're going to be dipping fish a lot for chemicals that have biological controls naturally in a biological system. And we're going to watch for side effects. And if there are side effects, we need to obviously remove medication and kind of reassess and start over. One thing we won't be talking about today is garlic or any of the reef safe treatments out there. We need more scientific, processes of treating disease. So here are some primary drugs that I use. I'm going to go through them really, really quickly. Copper is, mainly for ciliates, amyloidinium. Cryptocarrion is very broad. It kills a lot of things for a lot of species, or for a lot of parasitic diseases. But it's a poor use in freshwater because pH can make it very toxic at very low levels. So you definitely want to be careful of that. And fish tend to be sensitive to these treatments, so you definitely want to condition them before going through copper. Chloroquine diphosphate is a little more targeted for different parasites, usually ciliates and some other protozoa. But there are certain groups of fish that are sensitive to this treatment, like foxface I've found are very sensitive to chloroquine diphosphate, and wrasse are very sensitive to chloroquine diphosphate. So we definitely want to make sure to avoid those species. And the other thing is, too, is I've heard of some very negative effects with this drug with the mixture of praziquantel and chloroquine, and then its physical removal, like if you have a UV or carbon. For some reason, those two chemicals react and don't do well with a whole host of fish. Hyposalinity and hypersalinity, it can help with cryptocarrion, monogenians. It's very specific. And tank transfer method is also very specific, but it can be a nice way to get very sensitive fish through quarantine and prevent those pathogens. Formalin is what I consider a supportive drug hybrid with a main drug. It can get rid of a lot of monogenians. Is the first primary use for freshwater ick, and is very broad in its treatment use, but it does have biological controls. So you dose the formalin, right, the first time, it works great. It works awesome. Kills everything. Second time, a colony of bacteria starts to eat that. And that colony is started by that first round. The second round, you're having a shorter time frame of where it's at therapeutic dose. So it starts to lose every time you use formalin on a main tank or a quarantine tank. That biological control will actually eat up that formalin faster and faster and faster until you can't get it to therapeutic for more than a few minutes. It's kind of remarkable. And it is a carcinogen, so it's hard on fish, and hard on you. You should be using PPE and being very careful around it. So metronidazole is a kind of a antibacterial / antiparasitic hybrid, and has been linked to renal failure in fish if overdosed. So you got to be careful with it a little bit, but is great for getting some really nasties like urinema without using formalin. And then nitro is antimicrobial, so it takes care of pretty much everything on that lower spectrum, including the fungus and stuff like that. But it is hard on your biofilters, so you got to make sure you're testing for ammonia and nitrite. And then Batril, different antibiotics, kanamycin, sulfatrim, the sulfa group of antibiotics, tetracycline, that sort of thing. They'll take care of difficult bacterial issues, and a lot of them are vet prescribed. So it's kind of depends on your level and your ability to get some of those aquarist limitations. This is another supportive drug slide. We've got organophosphates, which is great for getting those higher order parasites. That includes large copepods, saltwater leeches, freshwater leeches, isopods, and monogenians again. But it is a neurotoxin, so use it sparingly and use it with all the proper PPE. Fenben is a nice anti-internal parasite med. A lot of these meds, are external. This is great for internal non-encysted nematodes and monogenians that are in tissue. And the feeding, you want to feed it to administer it. That's the best way to get it in the fish's system where it needs to be targeted, right? Same thing with levamisole. And then there's praziquantel, which is a huge, I guess, drug that I use because it's fairly mild. It's great for monogenians and internal cystitodes, but it also has biological control, just like the formalin. So you gotta use these things in dips versus your main tank usually to be most effective. All right, so we're gonna go through a quick slide of treatment in practice. We got sensitivities of this fish. This is a rabbit fish, or a fox face. Fox face don't do well with chloroquine diphosphate, so we're striking that from the regiment. The specific pathogens that we have for this fish, they're susceptible to flukes and internal parasites, so we definitely want to treat with fenben or levamisole to get rid of those internal worms. And the flukes, praziquantel is a great way to get rid of the monogenians that might come on the fish. We want to make sure that our pharmacological limits are able to treat this fish, and then our aquarist limits, praziquantel is going to be used frequently on this fish, so you're going to want to take that time for those dips. And this is a big fish, so you want to have a decent-sized quarantine for this fish. And then we begin medication and watch for adverse reactions. This fish can get really weird coloring if it's stressed. All right, we're on to confirmation. This is checking your homework and your work. And it's a key step and sometimes not possible. But if you have the ability to do it, do it. And it's generally done in the last few days of quarantine, but if something were to crop up, I would also do it then. Or even in the beginning of quarantine when you might have a fish come in with spots or infection of some sort. And you take biopsies to confirm, and these biopsies I'll actually demonstrate here in a little bit. And we look at them under a microscope, usually at 40x to 100x. Some parasites are hard to identify, so sometimes you need to get that extra to 400 or whatever. But usually you can tell what it is at 100x. So, we'll start with fin biopsies. I'll grab my blunt scissors here. And the fish, the fish is gonna probably struggle a little bit. I like to take biopsies off this pectoral fin, or any abnormal growth or slime or spot. I'll take a sample of that too if that's the case. So he's struggling, but you take just a little bit off, right? It doesn't need to be a whole lot of fin, and you want to make sure that it's even so you're not taking a slice out of it and then it becomes a problem later on. And then skin scrapes. I'll grab my slide here. I'll take a cover slide. And you'll go from pectoral to caudal peduncle. That's the fleshy part of the tail. Like this. And you'll get that slime coat on. You'll have that slime coat. It'll be a white, filmy substance, and hopefully you got some scales with it too. You want to be pretty gentle on a live fish. On a dead fish, not so gentle. And then gill biopsies. This can be a little risky, so you want to make sure that you're confident. And I generally only do this with larger fish. But it can be really valuable if a fish is on its last leg and you euthanize it, or if it died recently, you can take the whole gill out and set it on a slide and take a look at the whole thing. He's gonna drive me nuts. Oop. I'm gonna do before we do this, I'm gonna grab some actual slides and from this dead fish up here. So just bear with me for a moment. Okay, we're back. And what you're looking for is anything moving. There's a little part of a scale here, little tissue. That's completely normal. Oop. So this, I'm not seeing anything moving, which is a good thing. And I'm not seeing where my scale or my fin is. It's hard to see. And you want to have a little bit of water on the slide. I had very little. But I seem to have lost my fin. So we're gonna we're going to go on to the disease portion. All right. Monogeneans. It's a huge group. Most can be seen at 40x, and it's just a huge group. So you're kind of looking for something that moves like an inchworm or a leech, and this is an example of gyrodactylid, and you'll see the big hooks on the end. Those hooks go into the fish, and it feeds off the fish through that mean. This is saltwater Benedinia. You see the two hooks in the suckers up there, you know, it's just another example of a very, very wide-ranging species of fish, or of parasite, monogenean. And I guess the most notable treatment is praziquantel for most of these, at 4 to up to 20 ppm dips. This is Bruchinella, and I have a video because it's very interesting to watch. So Bruchinella is kind of small, but it's ventrally flat. So as we go along in this video, it'll actually turn sideways right there, and it's flat. So it's round, and then it's flat on one side. Very slow moving, and the cilia generally are on one side of the protozoa. So that's how you can identify that. Most notable medication for this is formalin. Uronema. So uronema is a tricky one. It's ubiquitous, so that means it's in the environment. No matter if you've quarantined everything, this is the most common thing that pops up after quarantine. It's kind of a nasty parasite. It likes to. It's often confused with a big bacterial infection because it comes out of the flesh of the fish, so it creates this nasty lesion. They're very fast and they're kind of teardrop shaped. I've seen H2O2 work for helping with this nasty parasite, as well as formalin dips and nitrofurazone, actually. So. And then I'll introduce you to Amylou. Amyludinium is probably the most problematic parasite in fresh and saltwater. If it's a little less common in freshwater, but it's super, super fast reproductive rate. Makes it very, very, very difficult to control once it's out of control. Right away, this slide doesn't have a lot of detail, but because of the sheer number of parasites on that gill filament, that kind of signals to me that it's Amyludinium right away. Pardon me. This is a closer image of Amyludinium, and come on, play. So they have a flagella. It's a big tail-like thing on their behind, and then there's some very defining nuclei as well.
3 new tanks have been added to the raffle from the fluval
Cryptocarian
contest.
is a very, very common parasite, and is commonly called white spot disease because it creates this massive reaction from the fish of a slime coat, and that's what all of that over that rotating little ball there is slime coat from the fish. And so you've got a U-shaped nuclei, or sorry, no, it's oval shaped and gets that large large slime coat over it. This is a very bad video, my worst one, but this is ick, freshwater ick. It's at 100x. But you'll get the you know, it's a very another slow rotating parasite, and it has that U-shaped nucleus. It's a very U-shaped nucleus. Trichodynia is not very problematic usually, but I wanted to note it because it's very pretty under a microscope. It's got very intricate pattern, very you know, perfect circle type with that spiral or spoke, wheel spoke look to it. This is probably my worst photo, and this is Epistylus. You can tell it's Epistylus by the arrowhead and then the long flagella. So, it's not the round circles. It's the long flagella type look. This is black ick. And it's very defined under a microscope with those two eye spots. It's like staring back at you. This is lympho. It's a viral infection. It's got those big globules of cells. It's kind of a, it's both freshwater and saltwater. And it's pretty benign unless it gets in like gill tissue or mouth areas. This is water mold, actual fungus, and you know it's got a very unique look, but can be confused with culminaris, which I'll get to next. It's got that big head and the long filaments. Oop. And this is culminaris. It's a little harder to see, but it has that same look to it. Best way to distinguish between the two is an acid fast test. It'll confirm that the bacteria is there. So. This is after post-mortem. This is actually in a liver. It's granuloma, and that just signals bacterial issues in organs, and you can see them in gills. You can see them in kidneys, obviously livers, gallbladder, that sort of thing. So definitely, if you're having mysterious deaths, that's probably my go-to thing to look for. And then this is gas embolism. So supersaturation is a issue probably more with bigger systems, but it's basically a pressurized gas in the water from cavitating pumps or a leak in the plumbing, and that can be cause mass mortality of fish. And you can see the little air bubbles on that slide there. That is indicative of the gas embolism in the gills. Another place where you can find that is actually in the eyes. The eyes get gas behind their eye or in the membrane of the eye, and it can be a bad situation. Any guesses as to what this is? Really intricate pattern, right? It's salt. Don't be fooled if your slide evaporates on you before you can look at it. So now we're on the last stage. Introduction. We just throw them in, right? Just throw them in. They're fine. They're good. They checked out. No! Don't just throw them in. That's the worst thing to do after you've put all this effort into this fish just to have its butt kicked and die. So social acclimation is a very important step as well. That can include rearranging tank decor, a mirror on the side of the glass for more aggressive species that might pick on it. Divide the tank, get the fish. You can use egg crate for a lot of fish and put vinyl tubing on the ends to prevent scratching glass and get a tight fit there. So if you can divide the tank somehow from the aggressor versus the new kid on the block, that's a great way to stop fish from harming each other for a few days while they get acclimated to each other. You can remove the aggressor to a sump or something, or a back swap quarantine to the main tank, and the aggressor from the main tank to the quarantine tank for a while. And I don't like to turn off lights. A lot of people suggest to turn off lights. I'll put them low for less stress, but turning off lights is it's the worst thing to do because the fish doesn't know where to go, and then they'll go somewhere, and it might be the home of someone, and that fish is attacking that other fish the whole night. So keep the lights low, don't turn them off. So this is an example of an acclimation box. It's one of the tools I use to significantly increase the introduction success. These are 2 flame wrasse. You can't get them anymore. They're in Hawaii. It'll allow them to basically settle in, and the bullies see them, but they can't attack them, and that makes it all good. Order matters a lot in introducing fish to make it very, very easier to get through. So, any questions? I know I went through fast, so don't be shy. All right. Well, I'll be back here for the next talk, so if you have any questions, come up. Thank you very much.